Forum for Community Solutions, which is a very new program. I used to say the newest program, but John Bridgeland, I think, gets to take credit for that. We're really excited to have this conversation with you guys. It's going to be a conversation, too. We're going to try our best to engage the audience, to have more discussion than talking heads. And really, you know, we're excited about it. So let me just say, like, this is our first program as the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions. So, you know, we've had some bumps along the way, but we've actually, I think, you know, we were smart. We were like, okay, first program, what do you do? Oh, talk about what you know about national service. Audience, get a receptive audience, get your friends together. So we followed all the rules, and we've got great friends and a great audience, and we're excited about the event. So let me just tell you quickly about the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions. Many of you already know it was born out of the White House Council for Community Solutions, and our mission is to lift up the stories of communities coming together to solve their most pressing challenges. And obviously, Aspen is a wonderful place to do that. Incredible megaphone, incredible colleagues, an incredible opportunity to share the story of community success that the White House Council helped to articulate, and to partner, in this case, with the Corporation for National Community Service right now at a time where they had actually hosted the White House Council for Community Solutions and had helped to make that a success. Also to co-host this with the Franklin Project, where John Bridgeland served on that White House Council, and it couldn't be a better sort of synergistic opportunity for us to all lift up this work. So, so welcome and thank you for being here. I also want to recognize Nick and Adam, who put a ton of work in. They might not even be in the room. There's Nick. Let's give him a hand for putting this together. Thank you, Nick, for pulling this meeting together. You know, I think I sort of shared with you why this conversation now, but let me just be really clear. There's a real opportunity from the learning that comes from this discussion today to influence and impact, I think, 3 or 4 very important audiences, at least I like to think important audiences. In one instance, it may be a self-important audience, because that would be the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions. You have an opportunity to help influence how we think about the forum's work, how we think about implementing the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund, where we're going to invest in the civic infrastructure in communities across the country, up to 20 different communities, around better pathways to opportunity for out-of-school and out-of-work youth, now named Opportunity Youth, thanks to the work of the White House Council. So you're going to help inform our work, all of you. You also have a chance to help inform the work of the Franklin Project, and Bridge will get up here in 2 minutes and tell you a little bit about that. But as that incredible momentum that's been created in a very short period of time around reinvigorating the national service movement in partnership with Wendy and her team and many others, as that work evolves, you have an opportunity to inform what the Franklin Project does as we seek to scale national service in this country, and then an opportunity to inform the tremendous leadership of the Corporation for National Community Service. It's amazing to see them here in full force, in full conversation, and so we hope that that we'll be able to influence you know, how we all think about this and how we all frame this work going forward, because you have 3 very, very receptive audiences. And then, you know, Chris Gates is here from PACE. Thank you for helping to host this, Chris. And PACE is Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement. So let's also influence philanthropy while we're at it. It's a you know, I was going to say killing 4 birds with 1 stone, but it's a feeding 4 birds with 1 piece of bread. So that's what we're doing today, and that's what this conversation is about. I think we also want to dispel 3 myths, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bridge. You know, one is that national service leaders have to have gone to Harvard or Princeton in our country. That's just a myth that you hear out there sometimes, and sometimes you know, it gets perpetuated. And you know, the conversations today, the leaders we'll hear from today, are going to help recognize that there are many kinds of leaders in the national service movement, and many folks who don't represent a particular background and history. A second myth that we hope to dispel today is that, you know, service is either about solving problems or about access to opportunity for the kind of young people who serve in corps and YouthBuild. And in fact, you know, in the conversations with Wendy, we know that that's not what any of us believe. You know, service can achieve great things, and it can be a hand up or an opportunity to engage to a better pathway to opportunity at the same time. So we want to dispel that myth that there's an either or about whether a young person gets to serve who's coming from a disconnected background or not, and whether that impacts community or not. And then, you know, the last thing is just the idea or the critique that national service hasn't built civic infrastructure for the long term in the low-income communities in our country. And, you know, I think this day will be testimony to the fact that there is so much civic capacity and civic infrastructure in our communities in this country that we can directly draw a line to the Corporation for National Community Service for supporting and helping to grow that. And so I think it's really important to just name those critiques that are out there sometimes. In particular, there are critiques that come from low-income communities. You know, having lived and worked in those most of my life, I've heard them. And I think we're having a chance to really put a spotlight on how false many of those, all of those assumptions and critiques are. And so that's part of the mission of this meeting. So we're super excited to be co-convening it with so many of you, with all of you, and especially in partnership with the Franklin Project as the two new kids on the block at the Aspen Institute. So I'll ask John to say a few words and to welcome you all as well.
Thanks, Steve. That was wonderful. I'll be brief. It's nice to come back to Sally Prouty's reunion. So it's thrilled to be here, and really is a family reunion. Steve set out the issues beautifully today, but I just wanted to say that for me, I love to try to stay grounded in the work and the ideas. And so 2 weeks ago, I'm chair of this organization called the Earth Conservation Corps, and it draws young people from Anacostia and Kenilworth and Congress Heights into hopefully a 9 months or a year of national service. And I was just with Daryl, and Daryl was looking through his telescope. He'd been through our program. They brought the nation's symbol, the bald eagle, back to Washington, D.C. And he's looking through this lens, and we're looking at the nest of the bald eagle that these young kids rescued for our country. And he goes, Bridge, that's a lifeline to hope. And this program's a lifeline to school and a lifeline to work. And so if national service isn't a lifeline to hope and to school, reconnecting to school, and a decent job at the end of the pipeline, I think we'll have not fulfilled our promise. Second, I had the privilege to serve on this White House Council for Community Solutions, thanks to Wendy and Melody Barnes and Steve Patrick and the people who are carrying on the work. And one of the things we discovered that was so powerful, and I just had a chance to talk to Leonard Chase, who's only 18 and has been in like national service and other programs, working in Baltimore for a long time, started as a kid. And to hear your uplifting story is just so inspiring. And what Leonard reflected, what we heard from all across the country, 70% of Opportunity Youth wanted to serve in their communities, and only 3% reported that they were. And there are lots of barriers and lots of things we need to do. But to me, that was a very hopeful, you know, sign for our country and the need to provide opportunities, you know, across youth in America. Final thing is just a quick word on the Franklin Project. How many of you have heard about it? All right, I'll be really brief. I want to thank Dan Glickman. He's on our leadership council and had a great public service career. And Harris Wofford, who keeps saying he's got so many former positions that we need to find a present one for him, which is working on the Franklin Project. And just quickly, General McChrystal said that, you know, for the first time in history, less than half of 1% of Americans are serving in our nation's military. He was the commander in Afghanistan of our forces, and that our notion of service has become dangerously narrow, and that we need a large-scale civilian national service. He got the standing ovation at Aspen. And so a group of us, being a lot of us in this room, are working together to figure out the ways and means by which we could actually bring civilian national service to scale on par with military service in the United States. There are 1.4 million Americans on active duty in our military. What would a system look like that provided 1 million young people in the United States opportunities to serve? And so through, you know, Wendy's doing brilliant work, and Bill and others on expanding the agency corps. There's an idea to expand the utilization of the GI Bill, so returning veterans can use them for a year of civilian national service to help their transitions home. A national service certification system. Imagine challenging every college and university, nonprofit, and other organization to create full-time national service positions with public and private support. And a key part of this plank has been working with Mel and Steve and a group of millennials, including a lot of Opportunity Youth, who are informing this plan of action that we hope to see fulfilled, endorsed by this extraordinary group of Americans, Condi Rice, Madeleine Albright, former national security advisors, CEOs of companies, and embrace this plan that includes at the center sort of opportunity youth and what they can become for the country. So that's a quick word on Franklin, and thrilled to co-host this with you.
Thanks, Rich. Okay, let's ask Wendy to please come up and just also welcome everyone and kick us off with some opening remarks. So our wonderful dynamic leader of the National Service Movement, folks, Wendy Spencer.
Thanks so much, Steve. All right, since we're casual, can I take a seat here since we're casual a little bit? And thank you very much. And do you need this?
Yes, that's this.
You do need it? You do need it, okay. All right, because I'm usually pretty loud, but I'll use that in case it's helpful to you. Thanks so much for a great platform today. I love this conversation. It's great to see you, Senator, my mentor, who's really assisting every one of us in each of our goals in the room. It's great to be among friends, Sally Prouty's reunion included. So great, Sally. So a couple of things I want to cover for you in just a few minutes. I want to share momentum, priority, strategy, and then give you a success story that you're going to be able to build on, for, I think, for the rest of the day. You didn't expect that, did you? A success story can do that, but I think that it's going to be a fabulous story that I'm going to share with you. We do have a lot of momentum. Thank you so much for the Franklin Project and all the work that's going in this. It's very exciting. I think it's going to help every one of our organizations in the room and across the country. Just the attention you're drawing to it is just really, really exciting. We are excited at the Corporation for National Community Service about several things. One is just our outreach. Deep into local communities through mayors. We had the Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service on April 9th, the brainchild of Mayor Nutter out of Philadelphia, who's the current chair of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Then we were sponsored and co-hosted by Cities of Service and also the National League of Cities. So we had great partners in these organizations and with Mayor Nutter leading it. But the idea was that across the country, mayors would take a day out in their community. They would bring together national service participants, AmeriCorps and Senior Corps, VISTAs, AmeriCorps NCCC, and thank them for their service to our country and talk about the impact in their hometown, in that mayor's city, about what the change that is being created through national service. We thought this would be great if we could get 300 mayors to sign on to do this. That would just be awesome, right? 300 mayors. 832 mayors later, and literally they were signing up in the dozens the hours before the deadline, because the staff, I think, the chief of staff to these mayors were seeing these lists on our website that showed the states and all the mayors that had signed on for Mayor's Day of Service Recognition, and their mayor wasn't on there, so they were calling us frantically, and we're literally changing the number. I think it changed like by 50 in the last 10 hours. It was crazy. If we'd had another week, I told Mayor Nutter we'd been at 1,000. He said next year we'll be at 1,000. But the reason that's significant is this is causing mayors to take notice of what service can and is doing in their communities. And I will tell you that mayors told me, I just met with one in Texas this week, that, you know, Wendy, I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were out there, and I knew you were doing good work, but I really did not know the depth and the initiatives and the breadth of all of the work that you're doing. And now I really want to tap into this as a strategy to meet my goals as this community's mayor. Just music to my ears. So, you know, sometimes you take a little bit of a marketing tool and you turn it into real action, and that's exactly what happened there. So I'm really thankful for that. Loved it. You know, proclamations are opportunities for governors, for members of Congress, for others to sign on and say, I support this. On AmeriCorps Week, we had, at last count, I don't remember how it was, but a couple of dozen governors signed proclamations. But this is Happy Senior Corps Week, everyone. Mm-hmm. This is Senior Corps Week. And we have, as of this morning, 40 governors have signed on proclamations just thanking Senior Corps volunteers in their communities and talking about the impact. And I just heard on my way over here that I think we'll have another 4 by the end of the day. And God help those 6 governors that haven't signed on by the end of the week. I don't know who's going to get that list out, but I imagine it might show up. But, I hope they'll still remain elected after that. But, not to thank these seniors. So momentum is good. You know, this is a bit of a marketing, but if we can turn it into real action and appreciation and gratitude and then strategies, we'll consider that success. The president just announced STEM AmeriCorps at the White House Science annual Science, what do we call it, Science Fair, which is fabulous. And if you want to get motivated about our young people, just read the report on the White House Science Fair. One, you'll be motivated, but you'll look at yourself in the mirror and say, what was I, just like the president said, what was I doing in 8th grade? I was not curing cancer or providing a safety prop for vehicles so that seniors wouldn't slam on the pedal instead of the brake. I mean, I walked through that science fair in awe with my jaw dropped, and the president kind of challenged the rest of it, says, you know, what were you all doing in 8th grade? And I can tell you I wasn't doing any of those things, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's very hopeful about our young people and what they're doing. But he announced STEM AmeriCorps, which is a great new initiative that we're excited to embark on with corporations around the country who are desperately in need of graduates in the science, technology, engineering, and math field. And it's desperate. And here's a statistic I'll share with you why. If we don't do something about this to encourage more young people to pursue one of the 3 STEM fields, the corporate sector in science, technology, engineering, and math throughout the country in the next 10 years will be short 1 million graduates that we need in these fields. That's a crisis, folks, at a time when jobs are, you know, we need jobs. I mean, it's there and ready. We just have to encourage our young people to pursue STEM degrees. So one way we can do this is through the help of AmeriCorps. And what corporations tell us is, I'm willing and able to loan my professional staff in classroom settings, in camps, whatever locations you need me to gather young people to get them excited about STEM. But the principals and the staff in the schools say, I can't coordinate it. I mean, I've spoken to dozens of principals who says, Wendy, this is great. I want these volunteers to come in, these citizen volunteers. I can't coordinate it. I don't have any staff that can organize a STEM after-school program or in school or on Saturday camps in my facility. I have the facilities, I have the students, I have the need, but I can't organize it. But what can AmeriCorps members do? They can be the implementation tool to organize and bring in, recruit these volunteers from these professionals, set up the program with the young people, give the opportunity after school from 3 to 6 to run these camps, and turn the dial on the trend so that we can get more, especially young girls. Only 24% of professionals in STEM are women. So you see the disproportionate there. So that's I'm excited about. I'm excited about the next wave, John, that you mentioned. FEMA Corps is going well. I'm happy to report a partnership with us and FEMA where, just like modeled after AmeriCorps and CCC, young people 18 to 24 are now in a program called FEMA Corps. It's an AmeriCorps program. They are assigned to one of the 5 campuses, the NCCC campuses around the country that we have, and they are deployed in teams of 10 or 12 to disasters to respond and work alongside volunteers, faith-based organizations, relief organizations, and FEMA professionals to get response and relief quickly to these disasters. We had, fortunately, just in time, 400 FEMA Corps young members ready to go when Hurricane Sandy hit. So we had over 400 sent immediately to Hurricane Sandy. We have 800 FEMA Corps young people assigned and ready now and being trained across the country. And soon we'll have, our goal is 1,600. Wonderful partnership with FEMA, and we actually, in this program, are saving FEMA annually $60 million because this is a cost-effective solution to response and recovery work, and it gives young people a pathway to a job in the type of relief and recovery work that the emergency managers are looking for youthful new applicants for in this field. But they also can go into other fields, and they have great organizational skills. Another, just one more in the momentum, and I want to talk quickly so I can get to the success story, but just had the opportunity to testify before the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee and talk about the work and the need that national service and impact is having with our veterans that are coming back. About 1 million will be returning in the next 4.5 to 5 years. They need jobs. They need support. It is not that easy for them to transition overnight back on the mainland and just expect them to just walk right into a successful opportunity with their family and in their local communities. They need our help, and we're going to be there, and we are there, helping them get connected to college, get connected to jobs, get connected to mental health counseling and other services, and also take care of their families. So that's sort of, I'm excited about the momentum, but let me move into priorities. We quickly, when I came on board over a year ago, quickly, of course, my blueprint was the Serve America Act and the recent strategic plan that the board of directors and the field and the Corporation for National Community Service had put in place. And it was just, I walked into a perfect scenario and quickly was able to embrace these strategies. But they fall into 6 buckets. So environment, economic opportunities, education, healthy futures, veterans, and disasters. And each of these, we're trying to make sure that they are leading to economic opportunities for individuals and for families. So if you just walk through quickly on those, education, clearly that's a simple one. You can picture that. Education should be focused, center focused for all of us, because that is the key to success. If we can make sure that our young people graduate and then have options beyond high school graduation, whether it's college, more additional education, or going right into a trade or a skill that's available to them with a high school degree. Easy to picture. Economic opportunities, housing, a key one. We really must have good housing for people, options for those that are as cost effective, affordable for them to live with, because if you don't have good housing for people, they can't, they're struggling with so many other needs. And they need to be also being citizens in a very safe environment too. They need to feel safe in their neighborhood. And if you get through those, if you can get through safety, housing, and food security, and then concentrate on your health, then you can start focusing on jobs and other avenues of support for your family or you as an individual. The environment, how do we connect environment to a strong economy? Look at the work we're doing with fire teams, making sure that we're pulling exotics and we're doing burns. This is coming from my state park hat when I was the state park director for Florida, but that is protecting our communities from having wildfires, and will literally overnight destroy communities as a whole or neighborhoods. So sometimes you don't put the two together, but there is a connection there. Disasters, if we can recover fast and get back to normalcy, that is going to help the economic condition for families and individuals. I just came back yesterday from West Texas. Unbelievable tour that I went to with West at the explosion. I have seen a lot of tornado damage, being from Florida, in my life, and hurricane damage and flooding, but this explosion disaster was something that I had not witnessed before firsthand, and it was very unusual. Things imploded from the inside out. It was just amazing, and one house would be untouched, another would be tragically destroyed, and it was hundreds of homes. That entire community of 2,800 citizens, every person in that community was affected in some way or another, either a family member or their job or a friend. They are responding, and it has really impacted that community. AmeriCorps and Senior Corps were there on the ground and responding hours after that disaster. The Mayor Muska, and Commissioner Lee, whose district it's in, came to me and could not thank me enough. We made a small grant of $195,000 to help recovery and provide support, staffing support for volunteer coordination for the next year for that community through the Heart of Texas RSVP, which is really going to expedite their ability to recover. But the commissioner and the mayor could not thank me enough. Says, Wendy, I really did not appreciate what national service could do, what AmeriCorps members could do in a disaster. And we were a bit lost, and because of the training, in one part was the Texas Conservation Corps, because of the training of these young people who came right in and knew exactly what to do and to take charge. Young people. 18 to 24-year-old. I mean, amazing. Says we were able to recover quickly and get services to people and meals and others. The Senior Corps program was delivering meals 2 days after the explosion. So disasters, the faster we can respond, we can work on prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery. Healthy futures, I mentioned the food security, but also getting people connected to resources in the healthcare arena, so they know and knowledgeable about what they can do. Veterans, I could talk for hours all afternoon about the veteran work, but I've mentioned that as a part. So, all right, so that's priorities. Let me move quickly into strategy and then share the story of success that I'll leave you with. 2 different things to leave you with. You mentioned, Steve, I think it was you, Steve, or John, that mentioned the sustainability of national service programs, and does it have a long-lasting impact? And we did we surveyed about 1,400 VISTA projects to see 2 to 5 years after the project had been stood up, was it still around and still effective? 84% of those 1,400 projects and initiatives were still effective and still organized and still running in those communities. Now, it doesn't mean that that's about 1,200. It doesn't mean that the other 200 were not effective or went away because they weren't needed. They might not have been needed. I'd have to do a deeper dive to show what happened to those couple hundred. But some of it is you solve a problem and you can step away and use resources for something else. But I'm so impressed that 84% of those programs are still operating, and that shows that sustainability. And that's really, when you invest federal resources and private sector resources, you want to know that's working. So I'm really pleased to share that statistic about VISTA, the capacity builders, and I'm great that Mary Strasser, our national director of VISTA, is here to share some thoughts from her experience as well. NCCC, 1,200 18 to 24-year-olds around the country in 5 campuses, serving in teams of 10 or 12, working on great projects at the call and need of local communities. We have a goal, actually in our Serve America Act, that we get to 50% from disadvantaged youth could serve, because this is a really sweet spot for us where they can work on a team, probably for the first time in their life, and give an opportunity to serve and give back and learn a lot of organizational skills and talents while they're serving others. I'm pleased to say that we're at about 33% now are coming from the disadvantaged youth or opportunity youth in our 1,200 members, and it's just really working well, and it's a great avenue for us to be able to provide to opportunity youth, and then they come out of it a leader and able to tell their friends and influence the communities that they came from if they choose to go back, because they've traveled the country at this point, and so they're exposed to places, many of them have never left their county at all, so this is a real opportunity for them. AmeriCorps, Bill Basil, our National Director of AmeriCorps, is here as well. Thank you, Bill, for agreeing to serve for us after serving the Washington State Commission for many years as their director. So AmeriCorps, through state commissions and through national director organizations, is really helping in so many ways, providing opportunities for all ages, 18 up to 107 or whatever the highest age would be. But this is giving, we're focusing on making sure that these grants are in the right place at the right time, engaging the right individuals for service. Not just happenstance, but really digging deep. Is this program, before we make that grant decision, going to have true impact on the ground? Driven by our new push for data and research and performance measures, which is new to our field. It is not easy to now tie AmeriCorps strategies with performance measures and really study it, but it is important to do so. And so we are starting to really now benefit from the results that are coming out from these performance measures. So those sort of our tools in the tool chest, and Senior Corps, engaging 360,000 seniors in service through foster grandparents, senior companions, and RSVP. But I want to give you 3 ways we can do this. And I'm sure there's got to be an acronym that'll come out of this. it's going to be from prevention to engagement to intervention. So here's what our thoughts are. On the prevention side, working very closely in education with AmeriCorps to assure that we are addressing early childhood education, third grade reading level, all the way up into high school, but trying to get to these students as quickly as possible so that they will be on grade level, be able to compete and stay in the classroom as early as they can. I mean, third grade is our goal, but if they're not at grade level at third, we need to keep being persistent with that, with the goal of high school graduation. That's on the prevention side. On the engagement side, and I mentioned this within CCC, engaging new Americans, engaging veterans, engaging people with disabilities, engaging our opportunity youth and our disadvantaged youth in the actual service so that their lives will transform as they are transforming others in communities on the solutions that their particular program is working on. And I think that is, we ought to give as much attention to who we are engaging in service as we are the outcome. And if we can be smart about that, we'll have, you know, it'll be a double down, and then the triple down effect is coming next, the intervention. Being there to intervene when things are not going right. So I'm going to tell you my closing story. To show you an example of this. I had the opportunity to meet a young man named Chris yesterday Monday. My days are running together. It was Monday, yeah, because I was in West yesterday. Monday from Austin, Texas. Chris is 18 years old. About 5 years ago, Chris was deep into dealing with drugs, taking drugs, and in a very, very downward spiral path to nowhere. Unfortunately, Chris was incarcerated in the Austin, Harris County Detention Center that houses, at any given time, around 70 young people for a variety of lengths of periods depending on their crime or their situation, their family situation, to dictate some of that, of who they could be returned to. But this is a full-fledged detention center that's very much engaged in the community. There are 3 foster grandparents that serve in this detention center 40 hours a week. Grandma Piper, Grandma Alice, and Grandma Chopper. I met all 3 of them. So 5 years ago, these 3 grandmas, foster grandparent program that we run through Senior Corps, met Chris and all of the young people in the detention center. And they have free roam around the entire center. They can go and sit with them at lunch or dinner. They can go into their classrooms with them while they're learning. They can socialize with them. They can meet them on the basketball court. They have free roam through the entire detention center, which complements to that, because not every detention center will allow this. That will be my next mission, is to make sure that they will. But anyway, they won't necessarily do this. They interacted with Chris in a very loving, caring, grandmotherly type way. No judgment, not trying to give lectures to Chris, just there for Chris in a loving way, and giving advice as it was gingerly needed and delivered, but not someone to tell them what to do. These are grandmas that are in their 70s. They're physically look older. They definitely look like grandmas. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to separate that from me, because I don't think I would have, even though I'm in my 50s, I don't think I would have the impact that these grandmas would. Because it wasn't a parent, it wasn't an adult that was going to lecture them, it was a grandma. And that's what they were called, is grandma. So it was a very positive reaction. Chris, fortunately, gets out of detention, and they don't see Chris for 5 years. At the Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service, Mayor Leffingwell in Austin gathered together on April 9th all of the National Service participants to come together and thank them in the area and talk about impact, which I just explained to you. Chris shows up. Chris now is an AmeriCorps member with the Texas Conservation Corps, through an AmeriCorps American Youth Works program. He's in a charter school. He's 18. He's an AmeriCorps member at the same time he's going to school, and he's going to graduate from high school. Now, grandmas haven't seen him. He comes up behind the grandmas quickly, and he grabs them around the neck, and he says, "Grandmas, do you remember me? I'm Chris. I was in the detention center with you, and you gave me love. And I'm an AmeriCorps member, and I'm about to graduate from high school, and I'm doing great, and I'm not doing drugs, and I'm doing really well now. And they just embraced, and I'm sure there were tears shed. There were certainly tears shed with me when I was reliving this with them. Tell you that. So we had the occasion to bring the grandmas together again and Chris together on Monday. And Chris gave his testimony, and the grandmas gave their testimony. And Chris told us that having the grandma in the detention center, someone that did not judge, gave them unconditional love, was a good listener, was their advocate, was by their side, sat in court with them, was a very key component in turning his life around. Because he was very resistant to adult and supervision and peer pressure and other things that were going on in his life. I asked Judge Muir, who remembered Chris also, who was in the detention center, I said, Judge Muir, is this really working for you? Having these grandmas, and I mean, couldn't you just do this without the foster grandparent program? And she went on this litany of about 15 minutes of telling me all the reasons why the foster grandparent program was having an amazing turnaround. Now, think about this. We have intervened in his life because the prevention was too late for him. We've been able to intervene in his life, but now prevention comes back. And why? Because now Chris is publicly stating why he is a new person. He has gone back to these grandmas who influenced them. He is not about to let these grandmas down now. He is going to continue to go on the right path. I don't think he'll ever slip. So now we've come back around and we've got a prevention tool because he's been able to come back, and he's in AmeriCorps. And he's going to be work quite well, and he's found his calling. It's going to be a firefighter. So I leave that story with you as a success story about strategy, priorities, and focus. And that's what we're trying to help do. So thank you so much.
That was terrific. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your leadership and for really putting the community in the Corporation for National Community Service. So
I'll be able to stay for a few more minutes, but unfortunately calling to slip out.
we understand and we appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thank you. So we're going to jump right into the panel, and really, Wendy provided the perfect segue. I mean, really, it is about community, and it's about how national service impacts community and families on the ground and the work on the ground. So without spending too much time, just let me tell you two things. We packed the agenda, so if you need a bio break, feel free to go. Come back quickly, please, and just take the breaks you need as we move through this. And then we didn't do the formal introductions, but we will put everyone's bios on our website and make them available for you all so that we want to just get into rich conversation, so we'll skip the long bios. And Denise Fairchild has got a great bio, not too long, I'm not going to say that. Great bio. And she's going to moderate our panel where we talk about this work. And I think everyone has acknowledged and outed Harris Wofford, our leader, a former senator and a mentor to most of the people in this room. And I think, Harris, we all have our stories of when we fell in love with Harris, and for me it was the first time I heard him speak publicly, and he talked about Swaraj, and which is Gandhi's term for Swa, self, Raj, rule, self-reliance, self-rule, in the context of India, where Gandhi thought his lesson to the world was the village, that India's lesson to the world was the village, that you could really achieve self-reliance, and it mattered not who was the leader, who was the Raj in that country, whether it was colonial or otherwise, if people didn't have their own concept of self-rule. And that's a lot of what this panel is going to be about. It's going to be about Swaraj. It's going to be about understanding how service at the community level leads to a level of self-reliance and a virtuous cycle of support. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Denise Fairchild to introduce herself and let the panelists introduce themselves and onward. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. My name is Denise Fairchild, President and CEO of Emerald Cities Collaborative, but most importantly, someone who is very passionate about community service. We're going to have a great discussion today, and I want to just find out before we start. It's designed to be a discussion and to engage you in that discussion. So part of the process is to figure out how many of you in the audience actually come out of a community service experience? Raise your hand. All right, great. Let's break that down a little bit more. How many of you as a youth, as an individual, actually did community service as a part of your growth and development in school? Did it as, oh my gosh, all right. So it seems to me a couple of things. How many of you are actually running community service organizations? Okay. So what this tells me is that you need to be contributing to this conversation as we go forward. We want to know as much about your experience on the subject of self-reliance and community building and individual leadership development. And we're going to tease it up with our facilitators, and we'll call them facilitators, but make certain that we find a way to make you a part of this conversation, because the ultimate goal for me is to make sure we scale up this work in the frame of the Franklin Project, to take your experience and multiply it 10 times over. So our job, I think, is to figure out how to do that. What are the pieces that are important, and what are the pieces that are scalable, and how quickly can we get there? All right. So with that, let's introduce our panelists. We have, I'm going to start with the male on the panel. At the other end is Steve Ramos. Steve Ramos is the Executive Director of Fresh Youth Initiatives. We're going to hear your story in a minute. Next to Steve, we have Simran Sidhu, and she's the Executive Director of YouthBuild Philadelphia. Raise your hand. And then Mary Strasser, who's the Director of AmeriCorps, VISTA, Corporation for National and Community Service. Just because I'm facilitating this, I'm going to just tell my story very quickly, and to say that my passion for this work comes out of the been there, done that background, which is, as a 19-year-old, I almost want to tear up on this. I got to work for the Newark Welfare Rights Organization. And I'll tell you how old I am. This is like 40-some years, folk. We're talking 1969, 70. Working on a food cooperative. I also worked in the Bronx on building a cooperative for a housing cooperative. And to be an intern and do that, it just meant you were a gopher. Go for this, go for that. We were sweeping the streets and what have you. However, that was the foundation for who I am and what I'm doing today. 40-plus years. It's an amazing experience. What are you learning, Steve, in your work? Tell us a little bit about Fresh Youth Initiatives. What are you doing, and what is it that you're seeing in this work? Why is it important?
That's a pretty loaded question. Good afternoon, everyone. So Fresh Youth Initiatives is a youth development organization based in Washington Heights, northern Manhattan, in New York City. 98% of the population there is Latino, and most of the young people that we work with are either first or second generation immigrants. Our philosophy is that a young person is going to aspire to become only what they're exposed to. So by being able to expose them to as many first-time new experiences as possible, providing them with academic support, exposing them to community service, and giving them quality guidance along the way, we feel those are 4 pillars that these young people can stand on in order to succeed. What I have seen is that, these young people are born with God-given talents and strengths. But when they're trying to aspire to become something, and only looking at the surrounding neighborhood, where also Washington Heights is in the top 5% of cities in New York, where young people are most at risk for juvenile delinquency, high school dropout, teenage pregnancy, and gang affiliation and/or participation. So as we're working with the young people, we really see that they have potential. And what they really need is nurture. They need to be guided, and they need to be developing a sense of family. When I speak with a lot of other stakeholders for the organization, a lot of them speak about, oh, why aren't the parents involved? Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? And what kind of dawned on me was that if you have children, young people, whose parents came from an island, let's say, and those parents maybe only made it up to the 3rd grade, how can we expect for these parents to provide their children with guidance on how to succeed past the 3rd grade? How can we expect someone who has never seen or worked in the train system, how can we expect those parents to teach the children how to navigate that, right? So what I'm seeing is that you have parents who genuinely love and care for their children, but do not know how to relate. The other thing I'm seeing is that, particularly in the United States and particularly females are taught to be independent, educated, and advocates for themselves. When they take those principles and take them home, they're smacked and told that they're being defiant and rude and disrespectful, right? So we are really the bridge at our organization and being able to communicate this to the parents, have them be aware of that. And what really drives me is that these young people have what it takes. All they need is the exposure and the guidance.
Thank you. We'll come back with some of those very important points.
Yeah.
Simran, tell us about what you do and why it's important.
Sure. So YouthBuild is this transformative program that gives young people who've dropped out of high school, who are between 18 and 21, the opportunity to re-engage with their education, earn a high school diploma, to also earn an industry-recognized credential as they do hands-on work in their communities, and really build very tangible things. That sort of infuses all of that with a good bit of leadership development and voice, and sort of giving them power and say-so in their lives, and sort of holds it all together. In some ways, service to the community is our transformative glue, because what it allows us to do is tap into that power that every young person has. And sure, they need to reconnect. Some of them come in at 4th grade reading level, but they're very capable of sort of making decisions about their community and looking into what's needed and then becoming powerful enough to do something. So we have all of our students are also part-time AmeriCorps members, and part of that service is tied in to their careers and what they want to do with their future, and to this education pathway. So for example, in our construction training track, all of the young people rebuild abandoned houses in the city. We've rebuilt 85 houses in the city of Philadelphia, and they're sold to first-time low-income homeowners. We just built a LEED Platinum certified house, our young students. And it's incredible because no one can ever take that wall and that house away. I have been with the program a really long time, and I still meet graduates from the class of '95, and they care about the community that their house was built in a completely different way, because suddenly that's their house. And so I will meet graduates, with their kids, and they'll say, "How's my house?" And there is that caring. And we are this program that has seen the incredible power of having young people sort of flip something in their heads when service is voluntary, when you get to make decisions about what matters in your community. Suddenly it is this incredible thing that you do. Wendy was actually with our program last week where Mayor Nutter, one of the award recipients, was a young woman from our program. And apart from sort of her usual training track in doing the construction that she's doing, she also chose another service track that she wanted to engage in. And as part of that, she went to a shelter. And the project was very simple. It was painting and engaging with the people who lived in that shelter. But she remembered, suddenly flashback to being a kid, and she'd actually been in that shelter. And there is power in being able to go back and know that you can give. And suddenly you should see what's happening with her post-secondary plans and what she's planning to do to college. She's in bridge programming now. But a good part of that happened because she could experience the power of giving back and having impact. That shelter is changed. That house has been built. Those nursing homes, they've been served. It's engaging with your community in a really different way. As Steve was talking about Mahatma Gandhi and all these lofty things, I remember actually my grandmother, maybe that's where it came from, when I went back to India, she was arguing. Someone said to me very bitterly, "What are you doing service in America for? Look at your own country, why aren't you serving here?" And my grandmother stopped them and said, community is defined by where you serve. And it's totally true. And for our students to have that definition of community is really a powerful thing. So that's how we use it.
Great.
Powerful story. All right, so Mary, tell us about your work in community service.
Well, I get to direct a wonderful, wonderful AmeriCorps program that has, I feel like I'm in the whole century of AmeriCorps and VISTA, with Harris being one of the initiators of the VISTA program as part of the War on Poverty in 1964, nearly 50 years ago, and Wendy leading us into the next 50 years. And so this is a program that was established, as I said, to be part of the War on Poverty. So our first tenet is anti-poverty, not making poverty more tolerable, but alleviating poverty and moving people out of poverty. Our second major tenet is community empowerment, and that leads to sustainability in our logic, and it's hardwired into our legislation so that when, as Wendy said, the VISTAs have completed their project, it's sustained beyond their years, beyond the corporation's investment in that community. And the final element of our program is capacity building, helping to build the capacity of those people in that community to have a better life, a better community, less poverty, better education, better economic outcomes, better employment, better housing, better food security. So currently we have about 8,000 VISTAs serving throughout the United States, and they tend to be people from 18 to 81. I think that that's kind of nice symmetry. But overwhelmingly, about 75% of the VISTAs that serve are between probably 18 and 25. So it's a remarkable program. There are legacy projects throughout the country, Habitat affiliates, food pantries, helping out with YouthBuild, helping to grow their capacity to serve even more young people in Philadelphia. I actually got to be at the first ribbon cutting of the first house that YouthBuild affiliate built. So I have a strong appreciation for this and all of the other programs that we see in the room today. And really, I brought some materials so that if you don't already have VISTAs or haven't had VISTAs to help build the capacity of the work that you're doing in the communities, we have some resources that would let you understand how this project works.
Great, thanks. All right, so I've heard a lot of things from each of you, and maybe some common elements. And what I heard was community service provides for leadership development, it provides for economic empowerment, it supports community development, probably other things. If you were to really think about success, when you think about your work and waking up in the morning or looking back 5 years from what you've done, what is that one factor that would say, I did it, this was successful? All those, you know, and you got to pick one. You probably can't say all of the above. What does success really look like for you?
I think it's sort of experiencing that sense that you're onto something. So for us, for example, I just recently there was a study that was released by a professor at the University of Pennsylvania who sort of researched the incidence of gun violence. And for years we had been working with the Philadelphia Horticultural Society to do these vacant lots that needed to be cleaned and greened and fenced off and doing all these things. And our students and AmeriCorps members worked on over 100 of them. And you know, for a while, what mattered to them was that it was in their community and they showed up and did a lovely job, and ours were the ones that had the nice wooden fence around them, and it was lots of work that can seem sort of you're just going on. But it was interesting because the study just showed that it has had this incredible impact on a reduction in gun violence in those communities. So they've actually mapped, in the areas that there are these 10 things, a reduction in gun violence. I can't think of the last time that anything got connected to a reduction in, and it's really powerful. But also I think, it gives me a sense when I shared it with students and they started to think about the long-term impact of their work. We're constantly talking about having different voices in leadership, in policy, in all of these places. And it's interesting that people raise their hands in the room. How many of you had service in your background? And yet, there's so much more we could be doing at that early stage to give young people from different communities that early experience, because it is where you can see sometimes that flashbulb going off when you're doing something in your community. When you're going in and you were a dropout and you're talking to a third grader about not dropping out, it's another sort of non-judgmental voice in there. You know, it's like, it's saying, look, I did this, you don't want to do it. And schools ask for our students to go back and speak to them. And, you know, I'm encouraged by the fact that in 10 years, these will be the people in this room who will be raising their hands and saying, yes, I got started with my service experience. And until then, no one had thought that I was powerful enough to do these kinds of things. So for me, that's...
So really, you're saying impact, being able to see impact of that service. It's not filing papers? All right.
Filing papers can be powerful too.
All right. So what's your sense of success, Steve?
It's interesting because as I'm, just kind of reflecting, I'm a graduate of the Public Ally program, which is under the umbrella of AmeriCorps. I'm from the inaugural class of New York City. Prior to Public Allies, I was a young person who had significant lack of supervision, to say the least. I was kicked out of 2 high schools. I did end up having to obtain my GED. And then I kind of fell into college. And in college, as I was obtaining my associate's degree, I took a sociology of education course, and that's really where it hit me that I wanted to work with young people. Upon graduating LaGuardia Community College, I then started working at a Beacon program and fell into the Public Ally apprenticeship program. So Public Allies, I feel, was really the catalyst for my success thus far. And what it did was it put me into a partner organization, and that was 13 years ago. Fresh Youth Initiatives was that partner organization. So I started there as an ally. So I'm the only public ally, I believe, that has been in their partner organization for 13 years, way past the 10-month apprenticeship, right? Also, I think the only public ally who started as an ally, and now 4 years ago I succeeded the founder and I'm currently the executive director. Also received the local and national Changemaker Award when it was first introduced. I think it was back in 2005. So when I think of my story, right, I was that disconnected young person, or opportunity, right? But and it really, this is something that I was at a crossroads, and it really put me onto the right path. Now also, because I've been with the organization for so long, I have also, so on a successful professional growth, I would say, look, I mean, I'm doing what I'm doing because I love. I didn't step into Fresh Youth Initiative saying, yeah, I want to be the executive director, but here I am, right? And so success for me would be when I work myself out of my job. And what I mean by that is there are young people who, there are 3 people on my staff that have been recently hired that I have known since they were 10 years old in our program. So they've grown up in our program, did what they have to do, and are now back. I also have 3 other employees who are also former public allies. So I have literally with myself 3 generations of public allies working at my agency, plus 3 young people who have gone through the organization. So for me to be able to put things in place where they're the ones running the show and I don't have a job anymore, I think that would be, in my opinion, what success is. But I will say I do what I do because I love it, and I've been so caught up in this tidal wave of just what's happening that I don't have a vision of, okay, I'm successful, I've hit it. I'm doing what I'm doing because I love it.
Great. Mm-hmm. If I could just leverage some of that, what I did with my experience was actually try to replicate it by establishing and adopting a Public Allies program at LA Trade Tech College and in the nonprofit I ran at the time. And I saw over a period of almost 10 years success every day when I engaged young people that were passionate about getting up in the morning and did not go down an alternative pathway, which they could have gone. This is in South Los Angeles.
Right.
And so seeing that light bulb, I think you had said, Simran, earlier about seeing that light bulb go on, seeing that excitement in their eyes, because there's so many things in our communities that dim the light, but someplace where they can go and participate and feel as if they are empowered and know they're empowered to contribute is our security blanket, because we're creating the future in each and every one of these experiences that we're providing. So sometimes it's hard to get the impact in the community because our communities are impacted by so much. But if we can individually capture as many of these young people as possible, that's why scale is so important, we can make a change once we get to that scale. So Mary, what's scale?
Gee,
what's
I was
success?
hoping you'd forget me.
No. We're going to do it.
So for me, it's challenging because there are more than 40 million people living in poverty right now. And our program's goal is to alleviate poverty. So I don't think that I have the ability or the capacity to reach that goal. So you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So what I'm hoping to do, and what I hope success is looking at the way we target our resources so they have the greatest impact in the communities in which they're serving. So we've, as Wendy described, we have several focus areas. We're not even using all 6 of those focus areas. We're really working on economic opportunity, education, veterans, and healthy futures, and looking at where we can have the biggest return on our investment with the resources that we have so we can move the needle. You know, before I go to bed at night, I know this sounds kind of corny, but I kind of think, I reflect on my day and say, did I move the needle on any of this work? And I try to be able to go to sleep at night saying, yeah, I did move the needle a little bit on this work. But it's a challenge, and I have some colleagues in the audience who really are responsible for helping me do that. And again, if you think that you're an organization that will help us move the needle on these challenges that our country is facing and opportunities, you know, we want to be your partner.
Well, you raise an important point, and it's sort of a little scary when Wendy, I think it was Wendy who talked about this notion of performance measures, performance outcomes, and return on investment. And so this question of success, how you measure success, is going to become increasingly important. And so because it's sort of a multi-layered experience, where is the ROI, or is it different for different people? How do you think about this in terms of return on investment? We heard from Mary. I didn't know if anyone wanted to take that.
I think of it in both senses. I mean, I think it's hard to be in anything that has to do with human beings where you look at only sort of a linear view of return on investment, but I think it's important to look at that. I think that we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that people are constantly asking themselves what is valuable to do, and here's a limited pool of money, and where does it have most impact. But I think that we also sort of deny ourselves, and we're big believers in data and sort of looking at everything and what's happening every day, and you know, it's every kind of data, but I think we're in a lot of trouble if we sort of don't look at the long-term anecdotal data also. Right. The kind of things that emerge when you've stopped reporting on a student, for example. So we enter data into 9 MIS systems, and I happily brag that we do it fabulously well. We have to do it well. It's our sort of, you know, when you take public money, you take that on all of these things. You have to build capacity to do some of those things. But I also think that you have to look at other things, because there is something else that emerges from it. The fact that every time I go into a school reform commission meeting, that I run into a graduate who's there because of their kid's school, that moves the needle. I can't put it in a report, but I know it's doing something, because there is someone from the community, often a young father, who is showing up to those meetings because we said at some point that you can change your community, and it's about showing up to the 800 meetings that you change the needle. It's, you know, it's serve first and you will move that needle. And so I think it's impacting in those ways, and I think we would be foolish to not find ways to capture some of that and see what it is. And I think the big you know, and I hear this argument, especially in my world of work. We are a charter school that serves 18 to 21-year-olds in a world that every study will tell you invest in early education. You're absolutely right. It is fantastic to do that. But we can't be willing to give up on a generation. We just cannot. There is a generation that is going to lead us, that is going to do all these things. And there is so much that we can do. If they are showing up to parent meetings and to school, these are not intrinsically fantastic things or wonderful. I go there because I'm paid to. But to see them there on a voluntary basis, that is some needle moving. And it's an incredible thing for me. I think you have to look at both.
Let me just ask the audience. I just want to mix it up just a little bit. What's ROI? What's the return on investment? And how do you think we should begin to measure success in community service? Should we measure it at all? Anybody have a strong opinion about that?
Well,
That means you want to.
Example of Chris Guzman. Think about what it would cost if there wasn't an intervention program from the Communities Detention Center, the foster grandparents, and the community organizations that work closely with those judges and that detention center. If they didn't do that right, he would continue to be either dealing drugs or he would be incarcerated in a very expensive prison as an adult today at 18 years old. And he would not be contributing back to the community. So you can put a price tag on what that costs every day.
Should we do that for every individual or for program at a programmatic level? I mean, it's how rigorous is this work?
I think there's enough data out there to look holistically at programs and see their impact and apply the cost and the benefit.
Okay. All right. Any other quick views?
Nick just came with the mic to make sure everybody uses a mic as we are recording this, and hopefully it'll be on the Aspen Network. I just want to flip the question back at Sim, because I think one of the interesting things about how you do community work is how you leverage the national service investment in, obviously you get the school money, the ADA money, you get a whole bunch of resources, but how do you use the national service resource to actually have greater impact? So what's the ROI for your students and for your community, and how do you think about that, like in particular post-secondary?
Sure. I think, for us, we are really sort of, when we enroll a young person in our program, what they see is sort of this sweet, loving place that they come to. But it's incredible, like we do actually do the job of sort of matching up resources to things. So for every student that, is a full-time, part-time AmeriCorps member through our program and gets that award, we're also trying to make sure that they're in a position to then use that award to actually do the other work that needs to go along with this identity shift as you start to serve your community. And so we are a charter school. We get average daily attendance funding so that students get their high school diploma, and there's a sort of a school. It's a very hands-on school. We also get job training funding so that students can earn that industry-recognized credentials. In fact, they've started earning 2 and 3 credentials because of how far we've managed to go on that. And it's wonderful. And then we learned about all the barriers that were getting in their way in using that education award, and sort of all the things that were happening in the disconnect between our program and community colleges, and have used private resources. I mean, I sort of think of it as meat and potatoes funding, and then our innovation funding that goes in and lets all these things work together that really help you match those programs up in a way that'll make the whole better. And so, at the end of a year, you have a graduate who's done bridge programming, who has a certification in industry, in some industry recognized credential, who's done work in the community and has a different sort of relationship with their community because of it. And then we follow up for a year when they're in college to make sure that that experience sticks and that they're succeeding there. And that is done through some private funding where they're getting transpasses every month, and it's making the difference. I mean, we've just been tracking some of our data, and we've had a 90% semester-on-semester retention rate for the cohort that started last year, and that's unheard of in community college circles. So it's sort of the whole thing working together, not in isolation.
Simran, one other thing that I think is important to this conversation, how many applicants do you have for the slots? You have 250?
Yeah, we had 900 applicants. for the 220 slots.
So that might be a conversation later on that we need to explore.
So that means that there's first a lot of multipliers go for the small investment that happens in community service, the ability to leverage other resources and to make the outcomes for other institutions even larger and more significant is amazing. So Steve, that gets to the question, particularly the leveraging issue about sustainability, and how many pieces of revenue do you have to pull together to sustain your work, and how sustainable is it, or how do you achieve sustainability?
It isn't easy. We're a very small organization. We're under $1 million. We see about 300 young people throughout the course of a year. So it's nothing at the scale of my colleagues here. However, it isn't easy. Wow. I want to go back to the ROI thing for a quick second, because being an executive director for the past 4 years, I must say also I have been baptized by fire. This isn't something I went to school for and hey, I fell into it, right? I totally understand and respect the need to be able to look, running a not-for-profit is running a business. You have to look at it at that, from that perspective. However, there are certain lines that need to be drawn. I have board members who are bankers, who look at things from that kind of perspective, and when it comes time to have to make cuts, just get rid of this person, and that person. When you're working with a not-for-profit after-school program that's deeply involved with these young people, I forgot to mention that the average FYI, Fresh Youth Initiatives participant is with us 5 to 6 years, volunteer over 1,000 hours of their time. 80% of the kids who make it through the whole leadership model that we currently have go directly into college, and 90% of all of our young people are promoted to the next grade. So and when you ask any young person why do they keep coming to FYI, their first response is usually, this is like a family to me. So with that said, there is this profound level of work that the staff put into the young people, because we understand that we need to gain their respect and their trust before we can begin to teach them right from wrong. So we're with them for a very long time. So if you have to cut one employee as the executive director, I not just have to think about this person giving them that message, but I have to think about how many kids might I lose because of this person's absence? How many one-on-ones and counseling sessions do I have to have with the whole population to talk to them about letting somebody go and what that process is? The other thing is, when you're dealing with the dynamic, something that's dealing with the dynamic of human behavior and development, we're not making car parts. We're dealing with human beings. You can't just turn the light off at 6 o'clock, good job, there you go. At around 5, 6 o'clock is where that child comes to you and says, I think I want to kill myself, and now you're there for an extra 3 or 4 hours, right? And then with ROI, coming up with systems and metrics and things like that, the one thing I want to say is we have to be very careful with that. The dynamic of human behavior and development is by far one of the hardest, if not close to impossible things to predict. We are all individuals and we are unique. So if we create a system and every person needs to go through that system and this is what they're being evaluated on, we are setting ourselves up for failure. So I needed to say that about that. Sustainability, it is nuts. Look, 80% of our funding is private. We get very little funding through the government, part by choice, but we're a very small fish in this larger pond. So I have to, go out there and, as one of my colleagues say, I got to go and shake my moneymaker, right? And it isn't easy, but what is a bit disheartening is when I speak with affluent people, and I talk to them about the services, what we do, how we provide. That's, sometimes I'll hear a comment like, "That's great. Oh, but you're spending too much money." So the other thing I'm hearing is when it comes to community service, leadership development, working with children, we are expected to give them the best experience possible at the cheapest price, right? In New York City, schools are given about $14,000 per student. After school programs are expected to spend anywhere around $2,500, right? So let's just say $16,000 a year on a young person. An affluent person pays $40,000 for their child's school, another $20,000 in extracurricular activities alone. So for their child, I'll give you $60,000 a year. for the children that we need to develop to make sure that these communities and this country rebuilds and survives, if you spend any more than $16,000, that's way too much. There's a significant disconnect, right? Yes, everyone wants to help. Yes, you want to make sure that your investment is creating a return, and I understand that. But I think there needs to be a very fine line and being very careful with putting a whole business system into the development of leadership.
All right, my little thoughts about this this work is understanding the different segments of the market that we're trying to reach. And so you've got disadvantaged youth or opportunity youth, and the investment that goes into that work when our young people are sort of on the edge. They can go one way or another, and which way they go depends on the kind of grandmas that are out there and interventions that are made. And so how do we go deep on this in long term? Because sometimes it just takes years. And your point, I mean, we had a Green Corps, and I thought I was just going to teach young people about reclaiming their communities to be greener and healthier, and all that took, but it was the after hours about getting someone out of, violated probation, or, found themselves in jail, or, and all those late night phone calls that you have to do. So this work for that segment of the population is not funded, and so how do we ensure that it goes deep? But the other strategy is for another population, at least the ones that make it into community colleges. And again, that's universal access. There's still folks challenged by failures of the K through 12 system. But at that level, how do we make those institutions create experiential learning opportunities for young people? They are not doing a good job at retention. And that's because they're making folks sit in the chair and learn, rote, reading, writing, and arithmetic, when our young people, the millennials, and I have one, I have also a Generation Xer, and they're two different animals. But how do we, they, learn by application and doing and experiencing, and they're already community experts. And so as community experts, how do we validate that they're knowledgeable and they're capable by giving them those experiences? But our institutions of higher learning, particularly community colleges, need to step up to the plate, in my view, to be able to come off the college and into the community and give young people that experience, give them credit and Pell Grants and whatever to move that. So I think there's some effort that we need to take into taking those established institutions, even high schools, and giving them different kinds of learning experiences. Can I shift a little bit now? We talked about ROI, we talked about success, how do you measure it? How do you actually do leadership development? And then we want to talk about how do you actually do community development. What's the technology for effective leadership development?
For us at FYI, I think the statement is leading by example. I've come from the same neighborhoods and the same kinds of upbringings as our young people, as our staff as well. Yeah, we do community service. We paint mailboxes. We run New York City's only youth-run food pantry. We make sleeping bags from scratch to distribute to the homeless. I'm dressed up today because this is where I am, but not too long, a couple of days ago, I was wearing a hoodie with my jeans and just painting mailboxes, right? We don't tell our children what we want them to do. We work with them and say, hey, let's do this together. So I think with regard to the young people, we really need to be able to see them eye to eye and talk with them, not at them. By being able to develop that relationship with them, we can then again begin to guide them. On a staff level, again, the same thing. It's really just leading by example, giving them opportunities, understanding that they're not going to execute things the same way you are, but they're still getting it done. And how do you kind of take that as it's moving and just really guide it to make sure that it's getting to where it needs to? On the institutional level, with regards to like the colleges and things like that, what we also have to realize is that colleges are receiving high school graduates or GED people who obtain their GED who have come out from a system, right? And this system, unfortunately, right now is really just focused on test taking. So if we're developing a generation of people who know how to pass a test, it's fine to understand that 2 + 2 = 4, but we're creating a huge disservice if we don't have them understand how 2 + 2 becomes 4, right? So I think that there's a lot of rewiring that needs to happen all across.
I think in our case, you know, we sort of do some sort of role modeling and just the evidence that you can be, but also sort of decoding and giving lots and lots and lots of opportunities to practice, but also to keep it quite real, because I think, you know, young people especially sense the BS from 10 miles away, and so if you're going to lie to them and say, oh, you have a voice, but really I'm not going to listen to anything you say, it falls apart. And so I think we have to be pretty deliberate about sort of saying, here's where you can change things, here's how it happens, here, you know, so it's multiple things, but I think we are big believers that you have to give opportunities to practice it, sometimes organically, but then also always be willing to point out when leadership happens, especially good leadership, that young people sort of will organically step up and do things, and to be able to say, you just led, and you can do this in 800 places. And that, you know, what you learn sometimes at YouthBuild, like we have this powerful culture of shout outs and things like that, and encouraging each other. And grads came back and said to us, you know, it doesn't happen everywhere. And so we said, what are you, passive? You know, and you can take this. And now they have community meetings on the community college campus that they convene, and that 30 YouthBuild people, you know, will go to, grads, and it's their thing that they led and they took it, but they practiced it a whole bunch before they went out there. And I think that happens at multiple points. And I think, you know, you're absolutely right. You can guide, but also remember to be guided occasionally. I think, because sometimes we don't know what's happening, and there is this generational difference. And every now and then, I think it's important, if you are doing leadership development, to stop and sort of challenge your assumptions and say, my gosh, I'm saying these young people are leading and leaders. What have I heard them say recently, really? And what have I done about it?
And if I may, just to piggyback on that, I think she hit it right on the head. You know, part of it is giving them the opportunity to and again, from my perspective with the youth, giving them the opportunity to just see what's going on. Then you have to be able to crystallize those teachable moments. This is exactly what you did. This is what leadership is, or this is what you need to work on, and what have you. After that, you also have to give them the ownership. Let them run with it. Give them the keys so that they can drive the car, but still have access to that emergency brake in case they're about to hit that wall. And along that way, in that process, they develop the encouragement, they believe in themselves, then they start taking the ownership, and then you can little by little just start stepping back and let that happen. Now, the other interesting thing is every person is at a different stage and is going to get there in a very different way. So you have to be open, and you have to have a lot of patience in understanding that.
You know, there's two things about VISTA. First of all, VISTAs live in the communities where they're serving, and they are stipended at the poverty level of the community in which they serve. And they're on call 24/7, 365. So this is not measured out. This is like you are there and you participate in this. And many of the VISTAs, 77%, as I said, say that this is a significant professional and personal development opportunity for them. But anecdotally, when you talk to VISTAs, and for me this is the most energizing part of my job, is spending time with the AmeriCorps VISTAs. But they will say to me that, you know, I've graduated from high school, I've graduated from college, and my friends have these very limiting kinds of jobs that, you know, you show up and you clock in and do this. And I have this big project that I'm supposed to complete within a year. And I have to do it. I have a year to do it, and I've got to do it. And for many people, that is a leap into leadership for them. They didn't believe that they could do this. A tool, a credential, not in the building trades necessarily, or in industrial certification, but a different kind of certification that says that this person has achieved something, accomplished something, and that should be translated into the marketplace as a resource for them to advance their career.
Well, you know, that's one of the things that I think that I'm proud of, is that I established the first AA program in the country in community organizing. and community planning. And so the experience that these young folks were having, they would also have to come to class at night, and by the time they finished, they were finished about a full year of a community college degree.
Right.
In community organizing, which is a career trajectory. I mean, that's exactly where I started.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And in fact, our enrollments went up after 2008. Everybody said, I want one of those jobs. So it is a pathway, and people don't understand it. And credentials and certificates and AAs and BAs and the presidency is the way to go.
Can I give you an example of someone, as I was preparing for this, I went back and going back to, there was a young woman in Wisconsin who was a VISTA back in the early 70s. And she established a credit union in that community that still exists now for low-income people. And she is now Gwen Moore, who is a congresswoman. So that's a really concrete example of a trajectory that started with a service experience.
I want to begin to open this up to the audience, but one of the things I want us to think about is, what I hear is, do we credential the community service operators? Is there some qualities and competencies and skills that are to do modeling effectively and to do group practice? And so it's a whole, we're talking about the young folks, but do we have the capacity to do this right? But we won't go there yet. I see a lot of hands out, so let's open it up to folks in the community, in the audience. Stand and use the mic, please. And give us your name.
Rodney Fuller, and from New York City. And I have 2 points to make. One is the point you just made about credentialing. Absolutely, I think service and volunteerism is a career track. Who knows, one day someone who's committed to service might become president. Oh, that may have happened already.
Yeah.
But my real concern is on a point that Steve made earlier, which is building community infrastructure. And my concern, I would like to hear the panel and the audience's perspective on this, is about making this national conversation more localized. And I think that's what's missing a lot. That for the work that we're doing in our communities, too often it's still very siloed, right? And so it almost began, and so we have, an amazing number of people who are volunteering in their communities, an amazing number of organizations who are doing individualized work in a very, very positive and meaningful way, but it still begs in some ways the so what question. So what if we are getting thousands of people to volunteer? So what if we're getting them to volunteer and commit thousands of volunteer hours of their time? So what if there's individual success with institutions and organizations if we're not building the infrastructure of the communities that they're in? And this dialogue, which is very helpful and very important, is not happening in some of the communities around our nation, where we are pulling together the community colleges and universities and the hospitals and the schools and the politicians and elected officials and other leaders in the community and talking about how to build a network and a web. And what's missing on a localized level, what the Aspen Institute's done so well here nationally, should be a convener. Who are the local conveners? Who are the institutions that are going to convene communities and neighborhoods together and have the conversation on how we can work together and build the total infrastructure? And I don't believe that's necessarily a fault of the national movement. I think it's a missed opportunity on the local level. People are working, institutions are working in silos, and they're not communicating, which is an issue in our industry altogether. So I'm just curious about other people's opinions about that and thoughts about that and what ideas there are about how to build the infrastructure.
So thank you for my next question. That is really about how do you build civic capacity, and are we building civic capacity in this community service work? And is that really community organizing? And then how much of that can we really do?
I mean, for me, you can call it what you want. I think that right now, the other thing to be able to retain and sustain leadership that's revolving around civic engagement, taking on responsibility for the things that matter, there's a significant paradigm shift that needs to occur. It hurts me when I see that people who can hit a ball with a bat are getting paid millions and millions of dollars, but yet janitors of public school systems are paid more than the teachers. It hurts me to hear that people who develop jails, in order for them to predict how many jails need to be built in the near future, they look at how many third graders were left back, right? Instead of looking at how many third graders were left back and saying this is how much we need to invest in this sector. It also hurts me when people say, oh, what do you do? I'm an executive director of a not-for-profit, and they say, oh, you're definitely not in it for the money, right? And quite frankly, I'm not. I mean, there's a payment for the soul that I get when I see that a young person has succeeded and I have assisted in that part, right? And that's something money can't buy, that gratification. But that gratification does not pay my light bill. It does not pay my mortgage payments, right? And I feel that there is, when it comes to things that have to do in the civil services, there is a significant lack of respect for the people who are here day in and day out trying to build this community, try to save and make it sustainable. And I think, you know, we can, again, think of all these other things, but there need, I feel, a movement and people understanding, yo, let's put the funding that's needed into this.
I think also there needs to be sort of this understanding that multiple people contribute to community infrastructure. So, you know, I'm thinking back to Wendy's story about the grandmas helping the young person. But it's interesting, our healthcare track students who do service are helping the grandmas because they go in there and they're sitting in the senior centers and they're the ones who are, you know, taking them on walks and doing all the things that need to be done. And it's good practice for them. It fits in with their career pathway, but it's also giving back. And I think there's a tendency sometimes when you're doing this work, you know, for me to look at sort of what young people do, for others to look at what, you know, a certain segment is doing. But I think capacity gets built from multiple places and sort of seeing who the multi-contributors are. Someone recently said YouthBuild was the anti-silo because I show up at all these meetings because we get fun, you know, we're in the housing world, we're in the healthcare world, we're in education, we're in service, and so I go to a lot of meetings is what it boils down to. But sometimes there is an importance in those meetings because you hear a perspective and you sort of can see that the lenses, and sometimes it is about really looking and listening to everyone who contributes and keeping that whole rich so that everyone is allowed to make that contribution.
Basically, that's fundamental to VISTA's success, that you need to engage community partners. Building partnerships is one important element of capacity building. And the people who are most successful in their year of service are those people who are successful at building those coalitions, building those partnerships, looking at the broader picture. Even though they're focused on one organization, how do you bring in other stakeholders so that this is permanent and successful? We spent a lot of time preparing our VISTAs to be successful with that. That's a key element of the week-long training that we provide for them. And so I agree with you 100%. I think that's fundamental to our work.
And I think it depends on how you organize your work in the LA experience. I mean, we'd have 35 public allies a year, and we'd split them up into the most impacted communities, South LA and East LA, and they'd work as teams, and they'd work with community residents. And because it was focused on a community planning program, we'd help bring the, and mostly immigrant communities together and talk about what are the problems and what are the strategies and the solutions. And the young people were the staff to this. And it continues, so there is real civic capacity that's been built, even though the young folks went off after 10 months. Some of them actually didn't, because about a third of them come right out of that community. So it's really geographically focused, and that is another question about if there is a targeted geographic emphasis to your work. When you deploy that kind of civic capacity or student capacity, service capacity, what can happen to a community? Can we really begin to see change? And that's the work that we're doing, even in Emerald Cities, to create resilient communities and help educate folks about what is a resilient community to you, and what do you want to see, and then how do we get resources to make this happen in our communities. So geography, how well does, or important is geography to this work, community service focus?
I mean, look, at Fresh Youth Initiatives, you know, the focus is youth development. It's using the community service as a vehicle to teach these young people the leadership skills, also providing them with the academic support and the exposure to new experiences. It just so happens for us that, you know, the founder of the organization decided to open up shop in Washington Heights. And it just so happened Washington Heights right now is predominantly a Dominican community, right? Look, I'm a Puerto Rican working in a predominantly Dominican community that graduated from a Jewish university, right? So you want to talk about diverse, that's all over the place. However, our approach, we recruit young people between the ages of 10 and 12. And the hope is to be able to retain them throughout their adolescence. The reason we chose 10 and 12 is, quite frankly, there's a lot of human behavior theories that really indicate with the way the brain works, the body begins changing. That's literally when the pubescent bomb is dropping. And if we are there to assist them as that happens and guide them through the crossroads of their lives, I really feel that is keeping these potentially disconnected youth connected, right? So I value and applaud all of the work that's happening on focusing on the opportunity youth that we now call them, but I feel that that work, which is highly valuable, you know, if you think of a severed artery, right, and we're talking with just the opportunity youth, what you're doing is cleaning up the blood. How do we stop the bleeding, right? And there really needs to, I feel, this dual approach and being able to kind of hit this at that end, because ultimately, look, I'm a social worker by training. My job in social work is not to have a job, right? Help enough people where they don't need social workers, right? So this whole movement is how do we get these young people to the point where they're running it, right? So it just so happens geographically we are there, but what I find to be very unique about the model that we have at Fresh Youth Initiatives, because it really works on this biological phenomenon that occurs to any normal functioning human being, this approach cuts across race, color, creed, ethnicity. So I really feel we have something that can be taken into any city, into any town, because think about it, you guys were all teenagers once, and you needed somebody to go to for the guidance. Some of you were fortunate enough to have the people, and then others, you know, when a 12-year-old is thinking about having doing something, I'm sorry, we call it risky behavior, right? When a 12-year-old is contemplating and engaging in a risky behavior, and all they have is a fellow 12-year-old to go to for that guidance, what you now have is the blind leading the blind, right? So at FYI, we are well aware of that. I think we can take this particular model anywhere.
One of the things, and we have a few more minutes, so we'll open it up, that we're hearing to your question is that there's a sector approach to service, which is environment, education, you know, health, and then there's a population approach, which is, you know, at-risk youth or, you know, seniors and veterans. It really, to build civic infrastructure, I think there needs to be a community focus. Mm-hmm. And that's where you bring and knit together all the pieces, and at the end of the day, you have stable or more stable communities. Mm-hmm. That's not a part of, it's not built into the program yet. So maybe that's the advocacy. So let's go. Question.
Hi, thank you for your presentations. It's always helpful to hear and learn more about the good work. One of the things that strikes me is more discussion about the parents, the young parents. As we've looked at, you know, the 6.5 million opportunity youth, about 21% are parents who have a child 8 years old or under in the home, and then probably more than a third, from what I understand, of the YouthBuild population are young parents. And just thinking about all the things they're navigating, and how can we think about strengthening a lot of our national partners, the infrastructure that you have, through what youth might say, who are young parents, who want to give their children as well that best chance at future success and those key supports. Because when I think of the return on investment, it's that next generation that is also a key element. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to build more structure into that, so that the young parents who are navigating both their children's success and their own can get some additional help in balancing those issues.
Okay, can we take 2 or 3 questions, just because I saw a lot of hands. I want to see if we can hold as many of these at the same time. There's way in the back.
Sure. I wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I wanted to raise the question, or go back to the issue of evaluation and the role of customer satisfaction, because some issues were raised. For instance, like examples, like a kid who might say, you know, you're the first person that ever, the people at this program are the first people that ever listened to me, or they validated me, or they were there at a time when nobody else was, and that there seems to be a value in getting to that. And that would be important to me in understanding the value of a program if a number of kids participating in it had those types of evaluations and said those types of things. So I was just curious about your thoughts on that. And also, like, as a part 2, of using evaluation not just as a means of saying, oh, okay, this program failed, so let's defund it, but using evaluation as a means of actually doing intervention, because I think there's a lot of programs where the people work there getting excellent success with kids, and they are having good relationships with them, but there's some other issues that they could do better. And that instead of just throwing out those programs and saying they don't work, there has to be space for saying they have something good, let's try to build up their infrastructure and with their other things that they need to achieve. So that's, I know it's kind of a statement, but it's also, I wanted to get your reaction to that.
We got it, though. Were there a couple more hands? Just one more here, and then we'll field those questions.
So
Oh, there are 2. Okay, so the one with the lady with the microphone, and then we'll come to you.
I just had a very practical question. I work with domestic violence survivors in DC, and majority of the clients I see are actually youth. So just on a very practical level, I like to talk to my clients about next steps, et cetera, kind of empowering themselves. And the service movement, I think, would be a great point of discussion, seeing if they're interested. But sometimes there's some hesitancy. So what would you have in terms of advice or strategies in actually talking to young people about the becoming part of the movement, and also with the young parents, because the majority of the people I see also have children of their own. So how does the conversation differ with them?
Thank you. And the last question here, and then we'll.
I want to go back to Steve's comment about the importance of intervening with kids as young as 10 to 12. And it also relates to the issue of building community civic infrastructure. I mean, the institution that's kind of not been mentioned very much in today's conversation are the schools. And obviously the schools capture most young people most of their time. And I think unless we bring the schools into it, it's going to be very difficult to figure out how to have a big impact on a large number of young people at a really formative point in their lives. There was a program at the corporation, as most of you know, which funded service learning and civic engagement in schools and community-based organizations that focused on younger kids. And unfortunately, that funding is no longer there. But it had a huge bang for the buck in terms of engaging literally millions of young students in community service. So I think we're missing a big piece of the community civic infrastructure if we don't engage the schools somehow in the conversation.
Okay. All right, team. So we've got young parents. We've got evaluation and investment in civic infrastructure for low-performing groups. We have violence and addressing issues of violence and schools? Go for it. What do you have?
Well, I'll take schools and I'll let my colleagues take on the others. As Wendy mentioned, a lot of our resources are being targeted on supporting schools. We announced STEM AmeriCorps, which is right now the signature project is a project with FIRST in robotics and getting kids engaged in experiential learning. Our VISTAs are working with school improvement grant schools in this area, building out the FIRST, which is the robotics competition for these kids. These are very successful in middle-class suburban communities. So we're taking that engagement that's important into schools where there aren't as many resources. Bill may talk about School Turnaround AmeriCorps, which is getting more AmeriCorps members into schools, helping to build their infrastructure. And another VISTA project that we've launched a year ago is Together for Tomorrow with the White House and the Department of Education, about bringing exactly the kinds of things that you're talking about, building a partner infrastructure to support this school improvement grant schools that are really under the scrutiny of the world to make changes for these kids that deserve it so much. So that we consider that a very high priority at the corporation and have been pretty creative in implementing that.
Great. I'm sorry, we only have a few more minutes.
You can respond to
and
me
we can
later.
come offline. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Steve is giving me the high five here. So, but I want to honor some of the other questions.
So we have 45% of our students are parents, and I think we do a lot of work with the mass parents. And so we have a parenting group, and every week someone comes in and talks. But we also honor them as good parents, not just as parents that need to get a lecture. And so what they do is form groups, and sometimes it's really valuable to have them talk to each other about how they are sort of navigating their own lives. And so much about that is actually very practical things could help. I mean, here we are, this really comprehensive program. I refuse to start a daycare because I think it's the thing that students need to know how to navigate so that when they lose us, they're not also losing all services, you know. But to wait in, you know, the wait for subsidized daycare, at least in Philadelphia, is insane. I mean, if I had a leverage chip and influence, that's where I would use it because it would, you know, dramatically change our outcomes for young parents. But I think we engage with them as parents, and we're fully aware of that impact on the next generation. The interesting thing is it's our biggest leverage to get to the parents. When we start having conversations about education, young men will often say, I don't care, you know, it's math. And then you say, what are you going to do when your child is in 5th grade? Do you want to be there? And suddenly the whole conversation changes. And it's been really interesting to me how active they've become in their, it's something that no one's capturing quite yet. If I can say just a thing about this, we are like the survey kings in terms of trying to find out how our students feel about us. I'm happy to say we've had like now I think 8 years in a row, every 3 months survey, all our students 100% say they would recommend us to someone. It matters, we get them to evaluate us teachers, how we're doing. But I think also, you know, it's important to start measuring and doing some other pre and post stuff around how we change perceptions. We're working with some researchers at Children's Hospital to try and get a sense of, does it change your outlook on optimism, happiness? Can you describe the 10 levels of joy? And does that change as you start to go through programs like ours as you go to it? I don't know if you want to take on some of the things.
Well, I was still thinking about the woman's comment in the back. Your question regarding the domestic violence, you also said that there was hesitancy. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Probably with our clients, it just has to do with change.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of not only being responsible for yourself, but also the community as well, is just kind of something. I mean, I think that it's kind of ingrained in you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that you should get a job and you should become an adult very quickly, and kind of carrying that back and saying, well, it's okay to take time out of your life to give back to others, et cetera. I mean, it's a very difficult conversation sometimes to have, especially with young people who already have grown up so much from what they've experienced prior.
Well, I mean, the one thing I can say in my experience is working with youth, Fortunately, you know, we don't have many issues with regard to domestic violence, but kind of putting on my social worker hat for a second, you know, I think that if you're able to acknowledge the resiliency of an individual who's gone through something like that, and then also ask them, you know, if they would be advocates, right? Would you like your child to go through this? If your child or your brother or your sister went through this same kind of experience, what would you tell them? I think that can begin to generate that. Young people love to feel like they're champions, and if you're able to guide them through that process, I can guarantee you they'll be more than happy to go out there and make as much noise. But they're also going to need the encouragement.
So let's give a round of applause to our facilitators. Very